Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 9th of December of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about London once again. I would like to remind you that yesterday there were talks between Ukraine, Germany, United Kingdom and France, and as a result of those talks Zelensky made lots of very important statements. Ukraine has no right to give up territory. Zelensky rejects Trump's plan. He justifies this by saying that Kiev cannot give up territory under the constitution, international law and moral law. Partners are proposing that Ukraine exchange parts of the Donetsk region and the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant for territories the Russians have not yet captured. Things are not easy at the front right now, but there is no need to be pessimistic about territories the enemy hasn't yet captured. That doesn't mean they will. Europe and Ukraine are preparing their own peace plan, which will be handed over to the United States by Tuesday evening, so most likely this is going to happen within the next several hours. The Americans are seeking a compromise in the negotiations, but that doesn't mean Ukraine should cede territory. The issue of exchanging Ukrainian territory for security guarantees is not being considered. Trump has his own vision for ending the war, which differs from Ukraine's. US security guarantees for Ukraine must be approved by Congress. So that was stated by Zelensky, and as we discussed during the previous video, that those were not just statements, that was something like an official rejection of the plan that was proposed by the United States of America. And right after those statements were published, the President of the United States of America made lots of very important statements about Ukraine and about Zelensky. It's time for presidential elections in Ukraine, says Trump. The understanding that Ukraine will not join NATO has been around for a long time. It's time for Zelensky to pull himself together and start accepting the US peace plan's proposals for resolving the Ukrainian conflict, because he's losing on the battlefield. Russia is now in a stronger negotiation position. There is no doubt about it. It's a much larger country. Biden gave him $350 billion, and look what he got. About 25% of his country is gone. So this is the situation, and we see that the President of the United States of America is very angry on Zelensky, and most likely in coming days we're gonna get additional updates and additional information about corruption scandals through Ukraine. We believe that soon we can get a lot of proofs, a lot of videos and audio tapes with Zelensky being involved into the corruption scandals. So let's wait and see what is going to be next, but we see that the United States of America increases their pressure on Zelensky and Ukraine to accept the US proposals. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very interesting updates. And first, let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction. During the previous day, the Russians managed to improve their positions on the eastern and the northeastern parts of the settlement by the name of Gulay Polye. The Russians continue their assault operation, and for these purposes, the Russians use everything they have, all means they have, but yet the Russians haven't managed to cross the river of Gaichul. The Russians are fighting for the northeastern and the eastern parts, and during the previous 24 hours, small changes were recorded according to neutral mappers. At the same time, the Russians stated that as a result of clashes, they managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Ostapovskaya, which is located to the north of the city of Gulay Polye. Here we can see how Russians were fighting for the settlement, how Russians were bombing the territory with tall flamethrower systems, how Russians destroyed a bridge further to the north in the area of the settlement of Andreevka, and in the final part of this video we can see a Russian flag. So this is the situation based on this video, based on the report published by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. We have adjusted the map. So this is the situation on the ground by the end of the 9th of December of 2025. Furthermore, several neutral mappers reported that the Russians managed to restore control over the settlement by the name of Dobropolye. If you remember, a few days ago Ukrainians published a video with Ukrainian flags, and based on that video we adjusted the map. Now we colored this territory as a gray zone. Now let's move further and let's talk about the north and the Zaporozhye direction. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very interesting updates. And the first one is that Ukrainians continue their counter-offensive operation in the area of the settlement by the name of Tikhaya. So this is the situation on the ground by the end of the 8th of December, and this is the end of the 9th of December. The Ukrainians launched a counter-offensive operation, most likely with the purpose to force the Russians to fall back from the river of Volcha. Furthermore, we had another interesting video. We received another very interesting video from the area of the settlement of Stepova. This video was published by Ukrainian sources, and here we can see how Ukrainians managed to attack a position of the armed force of the Russian Federation between the settlements of Verbova and Ternova. As a result of attack, the Ukrainians managed to ambush Russian soldiers there and to capture them. So later, Ukrainians forced the Russians under the control of FPV drone to move in the northern direction towards Ukrainian positions. So this episode with these prisoners of war took place exactly at this point. The Ukrainians somehow managed to get this territory and to capture Russian soldiers, and then to force them to move to the territory of that is under control of the armed forces of Ukraine. So this is a very interesting and very weird, let's say, episode from the battle in the Zaporozhye direction. It seems that the Russians doesn't have strong defense in this area, and if Ukrainians understand this, if Ukrainians realize that Russians don't have strong control over these territories, they may try to counterattack Russians in this area and to recapture these positions, while the Russians are focused on the battle on the city by the name of Gulay-Polya. So we expect a very powerful counteroffensive from the Ukrainian side between the settlements of Pokrovsk and Velika Mikhailovka towards the villages along the line between the villages of Vishnyovo, Verbova and Novonikolaevka. Now let's move further and let's talk about the city of Pokrovsk and the city of Mirnograd. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians improved their positions on the territory of the city of Mirnograd. The Russians captured almost completely the settlement of Svetlae, which is the western part of the Mirnograd agglomeration. This information today was provided by neutral mappers. This is the situation by the end of the 8th of December. This is the 9th of December. Furthermore, the Russians managed to improve their positions. They improved their positions in the southern part of the city. So there's just one block of the city of Mirnograd left under control of the armed forces of Ukraine. We're talking about the central one. We believe that in coming 10 days, the city of Mirnograd would be completely captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and the Ukrainians would be forced to, they will not be able to fall back from this area because the city is under complete encirclement. Furthermore, the Russians began their offensive operation in the direction of the cities of Belitsk and Dobropolye. We came to this conclusion based on the reports that we got from this area. During the previous 24 hours, the map was adjusted in this area in the Russian favor. So this is the situation by the end of the 8th, and this is the 9th of December. The Russians captured these territories, and the Russians continue advancing further in the area of the village of Novodonbass. Most likely, the Russians will try to outflank the settlement of Belitsk and to attack this mine and this elevation, and they will try to cut and pincers the settlement of Belitsk, and then they will move further in the northwestern direction towards the city of Dobropolye. As for the Konstantinovka direction, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything special. The Russians continue offensive operation. During the previous 24 hours, small changes on the ground were recorded. Basically, the changes that were provided yesterday by pro-Russian sources today were confirmed by neutral mappers. So nothing special, just small advance changes on the ground. The Russians continue consolidating their positions before moving further in the direction of the city of Konstantinovka. Now let's talk about the city of Siversk and the city of Liman. As you can see, during the previous 24 hours, we received the biggest number of updates and events exactly from this area. We have lots of icons of how Russians were attacking and destroying the Ukrainian logistic in this area. And we have lots of geolocations, and this video and this number of icons and updates tell us just about one thing. The Russians are concentrated, completely concentrated in this area. They are maybe over-concentrated, and the Russians are tasked tasks to finish the battle for the city of Siversk and probably the battle for the city of Liman in coming 2 weeks before the end of 2025. And most likely the Russians will be able to do this because today probably up to 70% of the city of Siversk were colored under control of the armored forces of the Russian Federation. Today this information was provided by neutral mappers and by pro-Ukrainian sources. So basically the defense of the city of Siversk collapsed completely. Now Ukrainians are trying to stabilize the situation along the river of Bakhmutka. So this is the river they're trying to hold their defense along this area, but most likely they will not be able to do this because the Russians at the same time are attacking the positions of the armored forces of Ukraine in this area from behind, from the settlement of Zvanovka. The river of Siversky Donetsk was crossed by Russians, and now the Russians have good chances to encircle Ukrainians in the most western part of the city of Siversk. Today the information was provided by pro-Ukrainian sources. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 6th of December of 2025, and this is exactly the moment when we started adjusting the map in Russian favor. So this is the 7th of December, this is 8th of December, and this is 9th of December. So more than 70% of the city of Siversk is already under complete control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and the Russians continue advancing. Furthermore, the Russians continue offensive operation in the direction of the settlement of Liman. The Ukrainians are trying to counterattack the Russians, trying to bring additional reinforcements and reserves, but probably it's just a matter of time when we start receiving updates from the city of Liman, from inside of the city, with Russian soldiers recorded in that area. Now let's talk about the city of Kupiansk. As for this direction, as you can see, we have significant changes, and this time we have changes in Ukrainian favor. So this is the situation by the end of the 4th of December, and this is exactly the moment when the map began adjusting in the Ukrainian favor. So this is the 5th of December. Ukrainians managed to improve their positions in the western part of the settlement, and we have this video where we can see a strong control of the armored forces of Ukraine over the territory. The Ukrainians are moving through the city without any risks of being attacked from the Russian side. This is the 6th of December. The Ukrainians improved their positions around the Yubileyny micro district. This information was provided by neutral mappers. By the end of the 7th of December, Ukrainians managed to improve their positions in the Zaskolye micro district. By the end of the 8th of December, we didn't receive anything, and by the end of the 9th of December, we can see this configuration of the map. The Ukrainians, according to neutral mappers, managed to improve their positions significantly. The entire southern part of the city of Kupiansk was recaptured by the armored forces of Ukraine. Furthermore, we have this video published by pro-Russian sources. Here we can see how Russians were attacking Ukrainians. For example, this building, this is exactly the moment that was geolocated, and this is exactly the place where Russians attacked Ukrainian soldiers. So somehow Ukrainians managed to get this territory. As of now, we don't know for sure how exactly to color this area, but one thing is clear: some groups of the armored forces of Ukraine managed to cut supply and support of the armored forces of the Russian Federation through its northern part. We believe that in coming days, maybe tomorrow, we will color this entire territory under complete control of the armored forces of Ukraine. As of now, we don't have enough of proofs to make these changes. This video is not enough because obviously Ukrainians managed to get there, but those could be just some groups of sabotage and reconnaissance forces or something like this. We need additional proofs, additional information, but if we get some, we will of course adjust the map. We see that Ukrainians are trying to do everything they can with the purpose to force the Russians to fall back. But at the same time, the pro-Russian sources published their vision of the situation. They're saying that small groups of Ukrainian units continue unsuccessful attempts to reach the rear of Russian forces along the Radkovka, Golubovka, Kucherevka line. The primary objective of Ukrainian forces remains cutting off supplies to Russian troops in Kupiansk. The tactics of large numbers of small groups from various directions appears to be based on the principle of someone will dig in. So the Russians confirmed that Ukrainians counterattack, that probably they have some partial success, and the Russians are saying that the situation is very difficult. As for the northeastern part of the Kharkiv region, the Russians during the previous 24 hours have almost secured and captured the settlements of Vilch and Liman. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the end of the 8th of December and this is the 9th of December. The Russians continue offensive operation. The presence of the Russians on the territory of the settlement of Vilch was recorded. By this video, we can see a Russian soldier that was attacked by Ukrainian FPV drone right exactly at this point. The Russians, according to different mappers, control up to 70% of the settlement of Vilche and 100% of the settlement of Liman. Ukrainians were forced to fall back from this area. These two villages are the final villages before the Russians enters huge operational space of the Kharkiv Oblast. From these positions, the Russians will face almost no barriers to attack in the direction of Belый Kolodец. The Russians will be able to advance further in the direction of the Pechenegi water reservoir with the purpose to take under complete control the entire northeastern part of Kharkiv region. We're talking about the territory between the Pechenegi water reservoir and the borders between Russia and Ukraine. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes on my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.